Hi, everybody. It's Rick Chavis with Battle Ready. The process of reinventing yourself. Throughout your life, you have some challenges. It's not really about what the challenges that you face. It's more how do you handle those challenges. And through these last couple of shows, we've been trying to not only talk through some of the challenges that people face, but also some of the solutions that are about for you. Today, we have the privilege of having Isht Vatsa. I hope I said that name right.
You
You
sure
can
did.
correct me if I didn't.
No.
Co-founder and partner of his law firm, and he does a lot of immigration. Welcome, Ish.
Hey, thanks for having me, Rick.
Hey, so tell me a little about what you do.
Yeah, sure. So I specialize really in employment-based immigration cases. So I do a lot of extraordinary ability cases, national interest waiver cases. I also work with employers, right, to handle treaty national visas, TNs. I do a lot of L1, H1B cases as well. And then I work with entrepreneurs to do E2 cases. I also handle some family matters, right? So if you're married to someone who's a US citizen or lawful permanent resident, I could provide guidance with that. And I do also provide support on asylum matters as well. So kind of just running the gamut of immigration law.
Amazing. So tell me, how did you get in? The law feels so broad. How did you come into specializing in immigration?
Yeah, sure, Rick. So I'm an immigrant, right? I came
Okay.
from India way back when I was 7 years old, and my dad came in on an L1 visa, and then we adjusted our status to green cards, and then I naturalized back in 2011. So I've kind of been on this story myself, and it's an honor to really guide people through that same story.
So what were some of the challenges you faced, if you can think back, as you were transitioning to getting your green card?
Yeah, so I mean, there's always a ton of uncertainty, right? Because after visas are handed out, there's a long list of conditions under which they can be pulled or revoked, and visas are really dependent on the employer-employee relationship also, right? So there was always friction in the home in the sense that if my dad ever lost his position, we would be heading home to India because he was entirely dependent on his position for his visa. So I think really the difficulty there, Ricky, is the uncertainty that families face, and then of course, the inability really, right, to build because of that uncertainty, that paralysis, before being able to buy a home, buy a nicer vehicle, really invest into their lives here in the U.S.
So how often do you deal with people with dual citizenships?
Often, right? I mean, we've got a fairly expansive policy, at least up until this point, for dual citizenships here in the US. So, I mean, individuals do often naturalize and keep the citizenships of their home country. I think it's a real misnomer to say that, just because you're trying to obtain US citizenship, you would be forced or compelled to give up the citizenship of your home country.
Actually have a little experience with that. My mother's German, and I was born in Germany, and my dad was in service. However,
Mhm.
I was born a little early, so I had dual citizenship, and I joined the army way back when. And
Mhm.
back between my first enlistment and second enlistment, I had to make a choice, or I would not be able to stay in the army. I don't know if that still happens. I mean, we're talking 86, 87, like
Oh,
quite
wow.
a few years
Yeah.
back, right? Um, I know that. I got a call from my mom because the German army, drafts up to 22, 23, and I was interpreter on Czech border, so there was a lot of questions going on back then.
Right.
So,
Right.
how often do you deal with military guys that have, like have dual citizenship that have that make them
Mm,
choices?
yeah. So there, I mean, ultimately that requires, I think, more of an allegiance to the U.S. And there are more specific rules for servicemen. I do know that if you have a military service history in a foreign country, you should really make sure that you are keeping all of those military records because the U.S. will ask you about your service, right? And again, the best policy there is to give candid answers, but it's very important to really substantiate that record so you're able to present that to U.S. authorities.
Sure. So you said earlier that you work with a lot of employers.
I
So do
do.
the employers reach out to you? Do the individuals reach out to you? How does that work?
Yeah, so I mean, I like to think of employers or companies as nothing but a set of individuals, right? So it's all
Sure.
about really forming strong or positive relationships between this, myself and decision makers at these respective companies, right? So it's maybe someone in HR will reach out to me, maybe someone on a technical team will reach out to me, and then I gain a further understanding of the company or the organization. And my goal there, Rick, is to really um, you know, develop an understanding for the organization's needs and then see, which immigration solutions I can provide to meet those needs.
And I think we were talking earlier that you're pretty active in the Houston area because of oil and gas, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I have, individual and institutional clients in the oil and gas space.
So how does it work with? So I work for Valorec,
Okay.
which is a Japanese French company. Well, actually, BAM USA, and we had
Hmm.
a lot of expats.
Hmm.
How involved are you with expats?
Um, Uh, quite a bit, right? Because individuals are trying to preserve their citizenship or they're trying to preserve their residency, right? So there's different rules about those aspects of emigrating, right? Leaving the United States. And then if you want to surrender your citizenship, that's an entire process as well, right? So it's kind of, movement into the US is one process and movement out of the US is another process. Yeah.
So you said something about surrender their foreign documents or the American. What does that mean? You
Yeah,
surrender
so
their
that means
citizenship.
kind of trying to move on past your citizenship because, for taxation purposes, some individuals may be trying to relinquish their US residency or relinquish their US citizenship, right? So emigration brings its own challenges as well, in addition to immigration.
What's one of the without really being real specific? One is one of the biggest challenges that you face in the immigration window.
Yeah, so I mean, do you mean personally as an attorney or
Yeah. Well,
challenges that
so
I have in my
in
client?
helping your clients either way, or even as
Yeah,
an attorney,
sure. I
sure.
could I could do both, Rick. I think for me individually, it's really maintaining that objective distance from my clients and to best serve them, right? Because immigration is an emotional process, right? People are bringing their families here. They're building lives here. They have friends here, right? And things are uncertain, so they're very invested in their processes, right? And it is truly an honor to be able to guide them through that process, but sometimes, there are uncertainties and there are curveballs that are thrown. And it's really about, as the professional guiding these individuals, kind of keeping my cool and keeping a logical perspective on what's going on to provide the best guidance I can.
You said keeping your cool. What would fire you up?
What would fire me up?
Yeah.
I think an arbitrary decision from USCIS or an immigration court would probably fire me up, just because you place a lot of time and personal investment into your clients' cases, and then sometimes when they render a decision that's arbitrary, it doesn't make any sense. I think that could be really frustrating, of course, for the clients, but then also for attorney professionals as well.
Sure. So, and you say, and I think you said earlier, you've been doing it a little over 6 years now.
Yeah, yeah. I've been in the immigration space for a bit more than 6 years. I was a government prosecutor before that time.
And so, what made you? We talk about in the show. It talks about reinventing yourself. So, I mean, you're still an attorney, but
Mhm.
you're segueing from one area to another. What made you change? What you made you make that change?
Yeah, so I mean, I felt like I would be serving clients better, kind of using my talents more in terms of taking on more writing heavy positions versus just being in court all the time. So that's why I made the transition from prosecution over to mainly employment based immigration law, where I do a lot of drafting. Sometimes I find myself missing court, which is also interesting, right? But
Sure.
so it was kind of a hard toggle, but I think that's really what guided my decision making. I also, like the opportunity to be able to serve immigrants, right? Just having been one myself, I just felt a personal connection to the work, and that was another motivator.
That's excuse me. One of the things is how long did you think about it or weigh the pros and cons of the transition? And what was the final thing that made you step over the line, if there was any?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I received an offer, and then I sat on that for about 2 weeks, and really what kind of pushed me over the line was just having like an increased set of responsibilities, right, and direct client facing work, right, which is really what I wanted to do. I think if you're a part of like, a large government organization, you are given a certain amount of responsibility and a certain amount of discretion. But I think if you're directly serving clients, then you kind of have more of the run of the play, and more of a room for growth there.
That's beautiful. So as we're getting ready to transition into a commercial, it's been really good talking. We'll be right back in a minute, everybody, to talk a little bit more with Ish.